If I had the first pick in the draft right now, I would seriously consider Justin Fields over Trevor Lawrence, and which obviously is contrary to people telling me that Trevor Lawrence is a generational talent and the best prospect since Andrew Luck or John Elway. So where do you, Todd McShay, who this is your life, where do you stack them up right now?
Well, I actually just had to turn in my first update of the top 32 prospects for ESPN.com, and I put Trevor Lawrence at 1, but moved Justin Fields up to 2. And it's based on a lot of factors. It's obviously starts with the tape and just what he brings physically, the ability to extend plays and the big arm and everything that he has physically, but also the improvement that he's made. Going back to the beginning of last year, I thought he was good early on for Ohio State, but Ryan Day, who's really good at developing quarterbacks, started to bring more and more out of Fields as the season went on. And that means, understanding where the blitz is coming from, knowing how to set up your protections and seeing the entire field. And Fields, to me, he made big strides from week 1, even week 6 or 7 to the end of the year last season. And then he comes out in the first 2 games, and he's just been on a tear. I mean, he's completing over 80% of his throws. He has not thrown an interception, 55 attempts. So he had 6 touchdown passes. And he seems like he really understands, obviously, his offense, but then what defenses have tried to do to him the first 2 weeks. And it's one thing against Indiana, which has a good team. It's a whole other thing against that Penn State defense to come out and play the way that he did. And they wind up scoring almost 40 points on that really good squad. So, listen, it's not the craziest thing I've heard, and I think there will be debates about it because as great as Trevor Lawrence is, Justin Fields is continuing to improve, and he has physical tools that are not that far off. Again, Lawrence, I have the highest grade on Trevor of any quarterback going back to 2012. And to me, you look at what he can bring and how calm he is and his demeanor. Andrew Luck is the highest grade that I've ever given out with a 99, but I have a 97 on Trevor and a 96 on Fields. So there's not a big difference. I understand what Pollock is saying. I think it's far off, and I think anyone who's watched these first 2 games, you have to be impressed with what he's done on the field and then also the improvement from last year.
So let me ask you this, because again, you live in this, and I in no way mean what I'm about to say to denigrate what Trevor Lawrence has accomplished or anything. He's obviously terrific,
Yep.
and you are one of everyone who says exactly what you just said. But if someone were to say to you that the conference he plays in, the competition he plays in week by week is not always the absolute highest caliber, and in the very biggest games last year against the really good teams, he didn't look that good against Ohio State, and he didn't look that good against LSU, and that concerns me. Is that not a valid question for a player who has a 99 rating from Todd McShay?
It is somewhat valid. I think there's, but again, you have to look at the full body of work. Look at him in the playoff the year earlier. Look what he did to Alabama, in that national championship game and just carving them up. So it's not like I don't have any concern about him performing in big games. And they couldn't get the passing game going last year in that Ohio State game that you're referencing. But I love the fact that he competed so hard and wound up just saying, you know what, whatever I have to do, we're going to find a way to win. And it wound up being him running the football and taking a bunch of hits, popping up, and just willing his team to win. So I love that about his game. Now, the one thing that can be frustrating as an evaluator when you're studying Trevor Lawrence is that they don't throw a lot of throws over the middle of the field that require anticipation, like you see in the NFL, seeing a zone coverage and trying to hit it in between the linebacker and safety, even man-to-man, trying to lead your receiver to open yards. When they do, he's successful at a reasonably high rate, but they just don't do a lot of that. So that, to me, is one thing that he's going to have to improve upon or continue to adjust as he gets into the NFL.
So again, I'm asking all these questions for a friend here, McShay. I think you understand where I'm coming from because you never know who might wind up having the first pick in the draft. But if you're one who, as I do, roots for the worst team in NFL history, it certainly feels kind of likely. So I guess I would ask you that. Do you, if you had to sort of put some odds on it, do you think there's a real chance that by the time we get to the end of this thing, that when we're all, wherever it is that we wind up next year, if we're lucky enough to be in Cleveland or wherever the draft is next year, that the name Justin Fields might wind up being the first one called on that night?
I still think it's a 90-10 proposition that Trevor Lawrence is the first overall pick. I think the bigger question, if you want to transition to the Jets specifically, is Sam Darnold. I think he can play at a really high level. You talk about a guy who has had nothing around him and everything that possibly could go wrong. And, he battles, and you see it. You watch more of the Jets than I do. I mean, the guy can play. So are you going to then use one of the 2 first-round picks that they have next year and the first overall pick on a quarterback when you have Darnold and knowing that you're going to try – if you want to do that, then you've got to trade away Darnold, and everyone in the league knows you want to trade Darnold. So – that part's going to be interesting to me if they're picking at number 1, whether it's Trevor Lawrence or Justin Fields. Are they going to just move on from Darnold knowing, like, full well, if you're Joe Douglas, you have a quarterback that can play at an extremely high level in the NFL in Sam Darnold. But you also know that the support has not been there, in part because, they haven't been in the building long enough to draft guys and develop them, and also because of some injuries and then trading guys away and all the nonsense that has gone on this year. So that's a difficult decision to make. And if you stick with Darnold, that's where I think you get value as you move back and get even more picks. They've got 4 first-round picks in the next 2 years.
Thank you for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.